thank you for taking the time to do these interviews. Very much appreciated. And if you would just start off by introducing yourself and what you do.
Okay, my name is Joel Kearns, and I'm Deputy Associate Administrator for Exploration in NASA's Science Mission Directorate in Washington, D.C. And part of my job is I'm the Program Director for Lunar Science at NASA, which includes Commercial Lunar Payload Services, or CLPS. That's how we get our experiments to the moon, is we go to industry through Commercial Lunar Payload Services, and we pay them to take our equipment to the moon and get our data back instead of us doing it ourselves.
Perfect. Thank you. So we'll just go ahead and get right into this. So since you mentioned CLPS, with the CLPS initiative, has NASA frequently stressed, or NASA has frequently stressed that failure is an option if it means companies like Intuitive Machines can make progress towards successfully delivering payloads. Are you able to shed light on how NASA quantifies or measures that progress? And do your success criteria for a mission adapt to that provider's previous performance?
What we do is we give them certain objectives in the service contract we set for them. Some of the objectives have to do with what data they get to us on their way to the moon and orbit around the moon, and what data they get back from the surface to the moon after they bring our cargo to the moon. So what we do is we evaluate how they did technically, how they did financially. Did they meet our main objectives we gave them? Did they have trouble with that? And of course, I will tell you, every one of these companies knows to be successful, they have to get really good at delivering things to the moon. So they're really highly motivated to learn from all their past work and try to do things better, in the future.
Thank you, sir. So next we've got many CLPS payloads include important precursor science to enable future human exploration of the moon. If you're expecting to lose a significant portion of these payloads, how is NASA ensuring that it will still meet its priority science and technology goals?
Well, one thing we do is we have a number of different approaches going in parallel to answer the same scientific questions, so that if any one particular commercial landing doesn't go well, we have another one coming up sometime in the future that will use a different technique to try to answer some of the same questions. And what that lets us do is it lets us be a little bit more agile, and we can react to unforeseen events. And it gives the companies a good idea of what we are likely to ask them to bring in future years, so they can think about the best way to do that. So we really pride ourselves on our agility for this, even though we realize we're taking more risk than if we did it the traditional way, which is we would either do it inside NASA, or we would have a team of NASA specialists tell someone who had a development contract exactly what NASA would like them to do. But by doing it the way we're doing it now, we're not only taking advantage of the companies that have, because they're different companies, they all have different strengths and technical approaches, some of which I will tell you NASA never would have thought up because of just heritage of how we've done things. And what it does do is it lets us take advantage of that, but it also lets us look at a number of different companies and get a feel for whose approaches are working well and which ones are challenging.
Perfect. So right now, CLPS seems to be focused on helping companies learn to land payloads on the moon. What's your long-term vision for this initiative?
Well, we would eventually like to be in the position, and it may be many years from now, where there are so many American companies that are making money from people other than NASA to take equipment to the moon, that when we go to one of them and say, well, we'd like you to take this science experiment to the moon, that they could just fit it on one of their landers that's already scheduled to go to the moon. That's a number of years away, probably. The very short term, what we want to see is we want to have a little group of American companies that are very good and efficient and successful at bringing cargo to the surface of the moon, because that will help us implement our Artemis campaign. So we don't have to be so concerned about that. We can be really concerned about the human missions that are going to the moon.
Perfect. So tying into that, will CLPS always carry small science and tech demos, or do you expect CLPS providers to deliver larger, more critical assets in the future?
Well, it's interesting that some of the companies that are participating in CLPS have also bid for other NASA work, which is much larger. So, for example, Intuitive Machines, that is going to launch their Intuitive Machines 2 mission to the South Pole tomorrow, as early as tomorrow. They also bid, and they won a competition to be one of the companies to tell NASA how to do what's called a lunar terrain vehicle, which is like the astronaut dune buggy that the astronauts will use on the lunar surface to go from place to place. So they have proposed even a bigger lander than the one they're using for IM-2 in order to bring this dune buggy to the moon, which they also will put together with their partners. So we're seeing a number of these companies branch out into doing bigger, larger scale things than we're even doing with CLPS.
Perfect. And that kind of ties into it. So that kind of gives them a sort of niche. So what is CLPS's niche among other Artemis cargo landers like HDL and the new logistics lander architecture element?
Well, all the we compete two landing services a year, and we tell the companies that are going to bid on them, these 13 companies that are part of CLPS, what we want them to do. And over the last couple of years, really since it started in 2018, we've only asked them to bring, say, 100 to, say, 500 kilograms of cargo to the moon. That's what these companies are focused on. They can do that with a relatively small scale lander. They can do that using available rockets like the Falcon 9. There could be times in the future, what we know, when we're going to ask them to either bring much more cargo to the moon, or potentially we could even ask them to have their lander operate much longer than just the 14 Earth day, lunar day. Right now, pretty well any lander that anyone's going to send to the moon, except for a couple of specialty ones from, say, from China, they will operate while there is heat and sunlight, and then when it becomes dark for 14 days on the moon, they drop temperature really quickly, they freeze up, and they don't work anymore. In the future, we're probably going to ask companies to provide that capability, and then someday we will probably even ask them to bring samples back from the surface of the moon to Earth. And if you think landing on the moon is challenging, tough to do, you can imagine how challenging it would be to land on the moon, get cargo, put it on your ship, and take the ship all the way back to Earth again. That will be a little ways in the future.
Perfect. That's all I had, and that's a great note to leave off on. So thank you very much, Dr.
Thank
Kearns.
you.